Boys and girls and everybody on the spectrum in between, this is the second episode of The Shutter Show. My name is Ken.
And I am David.
And we are going to be talking about a little movie by Lucio Fulci, Zombie 2, a.k.a. Zombie, a.k.a. Zombie Flesh Eaters, and several other titles.
It is a very hard film to look up on Google.
It is not, you have to add Lucio Fulci's name or 1979, some kind of moniker to let the internet know what you're looking for. There's a lot to talk about here. It is one of the all-time bangers when it comes to zombie films. It is probably in the trifecta of it is in the holy trinity of Italian horror films. It is one of the people in the holy trinity of Italian horror directors with Lucio Fulci. It is a hell of a movie. It is a movie where a zombie fights a shark. It has maybe one of the best eyeball scenes of all time. It is, much like our last movie, a series of moments and plots. Well, a series of moments and set pieces than a plot so much. But
yeah, as far as the plot goes, it's very simplistic.
It's incredibly simplistic.
It is bare bones writing. But where it shines is in the effects, and like we were saying, the set pieces, the weird-ish characters in sort of like... They're fascinating in kind of how bland they are, but also how over the top they are.
It is, this movie is very much, like if I was to compare this movie to a meal, it is a Sizzler salad bar in which none of the meals are really, like none of the food is really meant to go together necessarily. But each thing is pretty tasty. And if you just compare it on its own from moment to moment, I feel about Zombie the same way that I feel about JJ's first Star Wars Abomination, in that I like every moment that it's in front of me, but I don't like it as soon as I think about it terribly
Once you
long.
start to dissect it and really think about the logic behind it, then it...
It's not that kind of movie. It's not the kind of movie
you don't watch Zombie to really get introspective.
No. You're not looking for the character arcs. You're looking for the things that you've never seen before, and boy, does this movie have it. As I said before, this is a movie where a zombie fights a shark, and this is not some CGI stuff. This is literally a guy who is a shark wrangler who can hold his breath for a minute to 2 minutes, who is working with a shark that he has trained, that has had its teeth removed and has been drugged up. And
I was not aware of that.
Yep, that is how a zombie fights a shark. It's not... A lot of people think in movies you just go out and do stuff. Now, sometimes that happens. Like, as an example, if you've ever seen The French Connection, there were no permits for that chase scene. They just kind of went out and did most of it. They blocked off the streets for a couple of scenes.
Remake or...
No. There's only one French Connection, and there's the sequel, French Connection 2.
Okay, that's right.
Fun fact.
No, I'm thinking Italian Job.
Yes. French Connection. Yeah, when they're driving underneath the train tracks. Yeah, they blocked off the streets for like a hot minute to do like the scene where like the car hits the baby carriage that's being pushed through the streets.
Yeah,
that's fake.
Yeah.
But none of the rest really is. That's just them out there with permits, just out there doing it. Same thing kind of with the original Mad Max. They're literally, when they made the first Mad Max, there just wasn't a place to go get permits.
Oh, yeah.
So they just went out to the middle of nowhere. And let's be clear, in the outback of Australia is the definition of nowhere.
Most of it is the middle of nowhere.
Yes. And they just did it all. And it's mostly safely they did it. And and so this is one of those, they got a guy, they put him at the bottom of a tank. Also, super fun fact, the young lady in that scene. Yeah,
I was more worried about the woman with the shark than I was, because one had much more protection than the other one.
Yes, mainly because she's doing the scene mostly topless. Now, fun fact, that actress lied about being able to swim. which is why
What?
so many scenes,
What?
so many shots in that scene. She is doing the bare minimum, and she is there for the least amount of time possible because she. One of the PAs apparently took her to his pool house, his pool at his house to teach her how to swim. But one day of how to swim is not a whole lot of how to swim. Compounded with scuba diving, which is also incredibly hard and dangerous. So,
and you can't do with asthma, by the way.
Yes.
I tried, I do remember trying to go scuba diving, and apparently if you have asthma, it will fuck up your lungs pretty bad.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know that. But yeah, so that is one of those actors will tell you a lot of things in order to get a role.
Fake it till you make it.
And sometimes those things are not necessarily accurate.
But in this case, faking swimming is it's not something you can do quite as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a dangerous thing to do for sure. Now, Zombie 2 is interesting. Now, part of the reason it has so many titles, like why it's called both Zombie 2 and Zombie, is the original Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero movie.
Fucking wonderful movie.
Absolutely fantastic movie. Absolutely love it. That movie was released in Italy as Zombie. So this was released as Zombie 2 in Italy. But because Dawn of the Dead was released as Dawn of the Dead in America, it was released as Zombie.
Why was it released as Zombie in Italy?
Because the Italian film market is almost all foreign films get retitled in some way, shape, or form when they get translated into another title, because sometimes stuff just doesn't translate. There are and then the other thing was this movie was then called Zombie Flesh Eaters in the UK. So that's where the three main titles from this film
a movie that's super hard to Google.
Yes, Zombie Flesh Eaters would also be... Zombie Flesh is a little easier, because at least those three words go together. Yeah. But yeah, just calling this zombie, it makes it really, really tough. So in the intro to this movie, if you watch this on, check out the Blue Underground, their recent 4K restoration, Guillermo del Toro says that Fulci is one of the most brilliant, compulsive filmmakers in the genre. A film full of oh my god moments and you will not believe sensations and visceral satisfaction you will not believe. Some of the most graceful, poetic images in genre filmmaking, and I think that is a very good way to describe Lucio Fulci, because as a cinematographer, I will admit, damn near every movie, or every shot in this movie is gorgeous, or interesting, or has got a cool snap zoom to it, or uses composition in an interesting way. This film is incredibly well crafted, much like our last film.
Yeah. It's one of those cases where they go out of their way when they don't necessarily have to, but every time they do, it shows really, really well. And this is one of those films where I'm very glad that when you originally showed me the trailer for it, it wasn't a trailer. It was just a very long, boring clip of two, in quotes, New York cops finding a stranded boat, and then the clip itself ends when a zombie comes out of the closet. Mm-hmm. No, nothing beyond that. And so when I was about to watch this, I was almost worried. I'm like, am I going to watch a boring zombie movie?
I would never recommend it.
That literally just, everyone likes it because there is a zombie fighting a shark. And I am so happy that I did not... once again, which is why I'm so happy that this is the format that we have with our podcast, where I don't watch anything at all other than the trailer before taking on this movie.
So part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast with David is this is not one of those podcasts where we have a person who's just your average Joe, and I don't know anything about movies or movie history, and that's why I'm giving your opinion on movies, because I'm just a normal guy. It's kind of like, okay, neat. So a person who doesn't understand how any of the craft works together, it's just your raw opinion.
Dime a dozen.
Yeah, no, exactly. And every podcast is that. The great thing about... The reason I wanted to do this podcast was David and I have seen all of the low-hanging fruit. We've seen your Exorcists. We've seen your Texas Chainsaw Massacres. We've seen your Friday the 13th. We've seen your Halloweens. We've seen all the banger classics because we're horror fans. That's what we like to do. Now, I, on the other hand, am an absolute lunatic, and I am obsessed with the high-hanging fruit. I'm interested in the weird hybrid fruit that you can't even kind of eat sometimes.
He likes the fruit for the climb.
Yeah, I like The Outliers most of all, and after a little chat with David, I learned that there were a lot of outliers that he hadn't seen, and the outliers are why a service like Shudder means so much to me, because it puts out on the platform these smaller titles that don't get the respect that they deserve, that don't often get the restorations that they need, that a lot of people miss. And I know I'm saying this while we're talking about Zombi, which is probably Fulci's biggest film. As I said, one of the holy trinity of Italian horror movies. But it's also a movie that I know a lot of people haven't seen. When I have just mentioned, did you know there's a movie where a zombie fights a shark? They're like, I have heard about such a thing, but I did not know where it lied. And that's what I want to try and bring to our audience is the titles on Shudder that you don't immediately know that you need to go and see. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. As a horror fan, you have to go and see that movie. But if you don't know about Italian horror movies, you might be like, oh, well, what's great about those? And you're like, well, they do things differently. Like, say what you want about this movie, say what you want about the plot, but I guarantee you there is no better movie with eye trauma in it than Zombie.
Oh,
the eyeball scene in this movie
100%
is an absolute all-timer, one of the greatest bits of effects, like of visceral.
It was, that scene was so effective, and I started watching this movie with my fiance, and she kept up with it until that scene, and then it happened, and then she turned to me and she goes, "I'm going to bed. You have a good night." And I said, "I completely understand. I'm going to stay here and keep enjoying this delicious cake that is." But it's one of those cases, like, kind of what you're saying about Shudder. Like, I have seen the movie Arachnophobia, which I would say is the Anaconda of spider films. But I did not realize that Itsy Bitsy was a film that existed.
Okay.
And that is one of those films where you're just like, I would have never known about several of the films that I've just happened to just sample were it not for this service. It's a great way to just kind of find those little gems that you didn't know were hiding.
The people who are curating the titles at Shudder are it's very clear that they are real horror fans who actually like these movies and are not just coming through BuzzFeed lists and just looking for what people say are the best horror movies. Like, no, they are both making and curating some of the best stuff out there, and that's part of the reason that we wanted to make this show. Now, Now, I've said this a couple times. This film is in the holy trinity of Italian horror directors and films. And to be clear, what those three movies are would be Mario Bava's Black Sunday, Dario Argento's Suspiria, and then Lucio Fulci's Zombie. And the three main filmmakers, the holy trinity of Italian filmmakers, Italian horror filmmakers, in my opinion, is the same. I would add maybe Sergio Martino as an honorable mention, and Enzo Castarelli, if I'm right correctly, is also as another strong.
And here's another difference between the two of us, is that you are able to throw these names out there like nobody's business, whereas me, even if I have to be like, oh, it was that guy, oh, what's his name, he was in that movie, Dustin Hoffman? Yes, him, of course. I brain fart on celebrity, cinematographers, directors' names constantly. This man, on the other hand, has a sponge brain that just does nothing but just absorb movie history and facts.
I appreciate that. I do have the advantage of also being able to take some notes, but most of this is, I'll be honest, just me writing down, all right, what are all the things I want to say about Zombie? Lucio Fulci is one of those guys that I'm sorry, everyone. I actually graduated high school in the previous century. That's how old I am. But the advantage of that is that it means I do have a long memory. And I can remember all the way back to the days when we had to rent our movies on VHS tape. And in those days, when you went to Blockbuster, one of the things that separated that time was, let's say they took their box art incredibly seriously. There are plenty of movies that created... plenty of movies that would only exist because they just made an absolute incredible piece of box art that just made you be like, well, I don't know what that is. I just have to see that.
Nobody would have seen Chopping Mall without
or House
first seeing that.
Exactly. Yeah. No, there's so many great horror movies that have so much better box art than their actual content.
I also worked at Blockbuster during the great Blockbuster Exodus.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, I lived in Chicago at the time and was desperately needing money, so I would work wherever. I knew Netflix, like this is back when Netflix was still mailing out their DVDs, which when you say that later as you're older, that's when it's time to put Grandpa in a home.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But it was one of those cases where the first one I worked at, closed down. So then they moved me to another Blockbuster, and they're like, "Okay, we've got this new plan. Like, we're going to ship
this will be
things
the
around."
flagship
Exactly. We're not closed. Yeah. Like when people ask you, we're not closing. They were just in denial the whole way until they died.
Mm-hmm.
And then they moved. Then that one closed down, and I got a lot of my free movies via the exodus of Blockbuster. And then they moved me to a third one, and then that third one closed down. And then that's when I'm like, I think I'm going to go work at,
Hollywood Video.
At Staples. Because everyone's always going to need Staples.
So, one of the other things about Italian horror movies that are fantastic is they always have great titles. Zombie, while, yes, very hard to Google, great title. Knows you exactly what you're going to get. Like, it puts it right on the tin. It's like just saying tuna. And you're
no false advertising.
Yes, no, exactly. It is exactly what it's going to say. We're like, but does it have a Blade Runner in it? Is a question you can technically ask. But here are some of the titles that Lucio Fulci also did. House by the Cemetery, Beyond, City of the Living Dead, The New York Ripper, Lizard in a Woman's Skin, and Don't Torture a Duckling. Like,
what?
Yeah. Just a movie. a title, one of those titles like I Was a Teenage Werewolf or Twitch of the Death Nerve. We are like, I don't know what that means, but I want to go to there. I want to see this movie because that's such a rad title.
Just so long as they don't pull some like house that Jack built where the duckling just gets its feet cut off and then drowns. So long as it's not that kind of movie.
I mean, that is another strategy with a title. I'll make a title seem make a movie seem very boring when in fact it's going to absolutely ruin your weekend. That is a strategy.
Yep.
Now, all right. So now that we are definitely into this a little bit, let's start at the beginning. Holy shit, does this movie have an incredible opening. No, it is one of those movies that literally just kicks the front door in, and then just... The first shot of this movie is literally them just pointing a gun at you in close-up, and you're like, what is happening? Oh my god, we're in the middle of this movie. And then, like, literally, we're just off to the races.
Well, also, I would also say that it starts with a little bit of mystery, which is, like, I loved the opening. Because, yeah, that happens. Kick the door open, gun in your face. But before that, you see a guy in a sheet sort of slowly lift up. And obviously, like, that's a zombie. Door gets kicked open. The dude is completely in shadow. You don't know who it is. But he shoots the thing in the head. It goes down. And then there's this really cool accent from the shadowed man. And says, load them onto the boat. And I'm like... And then title. I'm like, okay... I'm all right. I'm on board.
The movie absolutely just grabs your attention from moment one. And as we have said before, the plot is a little light. David, how would you describe how would you give us a no spoilers plot here?
If you play video games, it's Dead Island. It is pretty much zombie vacation is the best way to say it. Like if you're, it's like if you went to Hawaii and turns out on the island of Hawaii, there's zombies.
Okay.
It is such a simplistic plot where it starts off and you think it's going to be in New York, but really it's a zombie island movie.
Yes, no, absolutely. It ends in New York.
Ends in New York
with a lot of traffic on the bridge, but this movie was made for this movie was not made for a lot of money, which is why I think the visuals and a lot of things that happen that's one of the things that's so impressive about it is because it was not a movie of means. It was a movie where they're stealing the shots at the end there, and then they're putting all their money into like the effects. I love the zombie designs in this film. Unlike Romero's zombies, which were made to feel a lot like they were us, with just like a light bit of makeup. These guys are just crumbling. They are just decomposed, gross. These are some of the grossest zombies that I've seen.
This is the zombie movie where the zombies come out of the cemetery.
Yes.
Whereas with Romero, like, there is definitely a political theme there. There is a surefire statement that is being made. In Zombie, it's a little bit more simplified, and it's one of those cases where you would not be able to tell that it was a sequel, or was a supposed sequel. And also the fact that the title is singular, I thought it was going to be focusing on this one specific zombie in the city of New York, and was very pleasantly surprised when things went to the island.
Yeah, and well, I mean, that's definitely it taking off on its Dawn of the Dead origins, because those movies famously end with them getting on the boat and going off to the island, and this is the movie that's about them being on the island.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I thought was really interesting in checking out some of the special features on the Blue Underground disc was that Troy Howarth, one of the special features guys, one of the people on the special features, mentioned that it was an important distinction with Zombie that it was not a ripoff, but it definitely was a cash-in.
Yeah, it did not feel like a ripoff.
Yes, no, exactly. And I think that's an important thing for people who are going to talk about this film in context with its history with the Romero films, is that, yes, it is definitely playing off of the popularity of that. But, like, the way the zombies are not the way the zombies are in Romero. The way that the movie plays is not just, oh, we're in a different mall. Like, it's a continuation of the concept that you get in Dawn of the Dead, but it is not a Xerox copy of Dawn of the Dead, where we were talking about before we started recording. There is the Cabin Fever, was it 3? I think it is, or the Cabin Fever remake. Sorry, that's just I think that's just called Cabin Fever. That's just like literally the first movie, just with different actors, and it's like, I mean, cool, but to what end, sir?
I'll just watch the original one that I loved so much.
Yeah, and like it's an interesting second footnote, I guess, after Gus Van Sant's Psycho, which was kind of the same thing, but at least that was a literal shot-for-shot remake. And there's also some interesting things about that film, at least I would argue, in the fact that, like, if you've seen Psycho 100 times, it's a chance to watch Psycho for the first time anew. Also, I would argue the acting in Gus Van Sant's Psycho is better than the acting in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. It's much less stagey. It's much more naturalistic. I mean, it's animation.
It has a more modern look to it.
Well, it definitely has a more modern look to it.
And it's not in black
but
and
it has
white.
a more modern feel to it. And which is why I consider it a very interesting cinematic footnote. Am I telling you to go out and see it? No. Am I telling you to go out and see it instead of Alfred Hitchcock's? No. What I'm saying is if you've seen Psycho a whole bunch of times, there is some value in watching it anew. There is some value in just the experiment of what happens when you remake a movie shot for shot. Doesn't mean it's good, though. There's a huge disparity in the film industry, or in film criticism. The difference between a movie being good, like, and a movie being something that you would enjoy, and like, in the same way that like a deep fried Twinkie at the state fair is not good for you, and no person would ever argue that it's good for you. But a person could argue that they like the taste under certain circumstances. You know, like when you're at the state fair having a good time, and you know, like where
it's something you enjoy once a year.
Well, it's not something that you want to eat all the time, but at the same time, in the way that like a salad can be something that is good for you, but you might not enjoy every single bite. It might not be the tastiest thing that you've eaten. You're always glad that you've eaten a salad, though. It's the difference between Jaws and Schindler's List. Which movie is better? It really depends, man, on what I'm in the mood for.
Yeah.
Like, am I in the mood for the world's perfect burger, or am I in the mood for a salad?
I've also never met anybody who was in the mood for Schindler's List.
It's one of those movies when I see it on people's shelves, I was like, did you write a paper about this? Otherwise,
I have a copy of Schindler's List that has never been opened.
Yeah, I have seen that phenomenon in the wild many times. The still gift wrapped Blu-ray or DVD of Schindler's List that clearly was bought because they felt like they should own this movie, but it's not a movie that they want to pop on. And that's one of the things in filmmaking, that's one of the things I really want to change about the way that we talk about films, because I can enjoy a movie and also admit to you it is not good. But I can also find the benefit of things in movies that I don't enjoy. Do I enjoy the movie Irreversible? No. No. I don't know anyone who does. But man, the filmmaking in it is pretty undeniably great.
The Island of Dr. Moreau is in no way, shape, or form a good film. The story behind how it got made, though, is fascinating.
No, absolutely. And you can also have movies that are this movie I described very much as a salad bar. Nothing really goes together. But individually, all the different pieces are very, very tasty.
The fried chicken is next to the weird sushi. Like there's a lot. They're both delicious, but there's a lot of weird smells going together.
They're not paired together. It's not like, ooh, a nice crisp Pinot Grigio to go with your salad. Like, no. This is just like, I also like root beer, and I also like steak, and I also like ice cream. It is let's be clear. Like, you can take some of your favorite things and combine them into make something awful. I like tuna fish and I like ice cream, but I do not want to ever try tuna fish ice cream. That sounds like a hate crime. I'm pretty sure combining tuna fish and ice cream is like illegal in some states. But I like both of those things individually. I just don't want them to go together.
It'll start a riot.
Yeah, no, or just like there can be things in a salad bar that are also things that you should avoid. This movie has some problematic elements to it. It's not nearly as problematic, I would say, as our previous movie. It does suffer from a little too much. Well, it does suffer from a little bit of a pointless nudity.
Which, by the way, I called it well before it happened. The second that she came on screen, I turned to my fiance and I was like, $10 says that we see her topless in the next 10 minutes. And in 5 minutes, stripping down on the boat. And then Katie just looks at me and she goes, huh. I'm like, yep. I've seen enough of these.
There was a time and a place, particularly before the internet, where you needed to have nudity in your movie in order to get distribution. And this was purely, securely made in that time. Let's see here. Okay, so something we can talk about in this movie that people might not know about is where this movie kind of fits in the history of zombies.
Okay.
Now, zombie lore itself starts out in Haiti, and you've got a couple of older films that kind of use zombies in their traditional way. I believe Isle of the Zombie is one of them. There's one more movie I'm not remembering at the moment. That's also got zombie in the title that uses the kind of traditional Haitian zombies. But it wasn't until Romero's Night of the Living Dead movies where the modern day idea, or at least the modern day idea of zombies got started. Where, interestingly enough, he didn't even call them zombies in that movie.
Where it became part of pop culture.
Well, they were called ghouls then. But the idea of the flesh-eating, back from the dead, for XYZ reason, depending on which version you're watching in. But the Haitian zombies, which the easiest movie to seek out that kind of does it straight out is The Serpent and the Rainbow with Bill Pullman. Great Wes Craven movie, but that does your traditional, you get buried, there's magic involved, they bring you back from the dead, that kind of zombie. This is the proto modern zombie of shuffling around and eating flesh and being interested in brains, and of which I guess the next generation then was running zombies, seen like in Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, and technically in 28 Days Later, although technically those are called sickos because they're not dead, they're just got a disease. But if we're talking about zombies that are running around, we got to talk about 28 Days Later, and you got Train to Busan, and a lot of other movies that have kind of done that since. And this movie kind of lands right in that transition. This movie comes out as a result of them releasing Dawn of the Dead. It comes out the year afterwards, so this movie goes right into production. Dawn of the Dead does huge. It's actually even released in America released in Italy before it's released in America because of a rights dispute. So Dawn of the Dead comes out in Italy, does incredibly well, and literally the next day they're like, hey, we're gonna make a zombie movie. Because I don't know if you know anything about the Italian film industry, that's just how they do. most of the films, a huge amount of the films, most of the Italian film industry, we'll say, is either a ripoff or a cash industry, or a cash-in at this time.
Yeah.
One of the things you might have noticed about this Italian movie is that it's not in Italian. And that's because of the Italian style of production at the time called the Tower of Babel production style, where basically they let all the actors speak whatever language that they wanted, whatever they were most comfortable with, and then they would just dub them afterwards, which results sometimes in one of the actors dubbing a couple of different characters. Sometimes that results in like a lot of Zombie was shot in English, so like there's no problem with the dubbing. But other times, you'd have one actor who was just doing their own thing in their own scene, just totally in Italian, and you just responded in English, and then they just fixed it later in post.
Yeah, I actually, while I was watching it, I did have to text you in the middle of it just to be like, okay, remind me again why it looks like the words are matching up with some of these actors, but with the other ones, it looks like it's a dub thing.
Yeah,
I was like, was the sound quality bad? Was it? And they're like, oh no, it's, I guess, which I can imagine how weird that must have been for some of the actors who were speaking English against Italian speech.
Well, you really had to know your lines because there were no cues. There was no figuring it out by what the other person was saying. But it was just it was one of those. It was just a nature of the fact that like the way most of the films in Italy were not going to be. They weren't going to make their money in Italy. They were going to make their money everywhere else. So they might as well let the actors, and like that allowed them to get actors like bigger stars. Because like one of the things that would happen is they'd call up an American film actor and be like, hey, do you want to come to Italy and make movies? And they'd be like, well, I don't speak Italian. And they're like, that's fine. You don't have to. And like for the Italian dub, they'd get some Italian person or someone who spoke Italian to dub in famous actor's person. But then the main track that would go out would be in English. And sometimes it's more noticeable, but it's as someone who watches a lot of foreign films, and most of the time, putting on the dub track is not the way to do things. With Italian genre films from the 60s and 70s, that's the English dub track a lot of time is actually kind of the official track of the movie. It's the one that most people would have interacted with. A lot of times it's got the one that's got the most money spent on it. Because there can be difference between foreign and English soundtracks with quality of sound effects and with Foley and other stuff that's going on, just the performances as well. But that's just something, if you don't know anything about Italian films and you're coming to this raw and you're like, why does this feel like a weird dub? And am I doing something, like, am I going to get my film card taken away because I'm watching a dub?
But at least...
In this case, no.
At least because it's dubbed, I can say... with a lot of older films, the sound quality when it comes to picking up the speech that's happening, you don't necessarily... It's tough to hear what's being said. Mm-hmm. But at least with it being dubbed, I could understand everything word for word. I was just a little confused at first because the words didn't match the lips. And I'm like, is the sound off? Is the timing off? Is something happening here? But now, like for anyone going into this film, which, by the way, if you're coming onto this, I would highly recommend watching the film first before you listen to the podcast. But at the same time, at least now you know why that was so weird.
I mean, this is kind of a hard movie to spoil. Like, I could list you the characters who died, but like...
It's not like Game of Thrones, where you're like, what happened to this? Like...
Yeah, or Sixth Sense, where there's a big twist that you could reveal. Yeah. There's a big,
There's no twist. There's no character you've been invested in from the beginning. There's...
People go to an island, some of them die.
Yeah.
Like that...
It is a zombie film.
Yeah, I mean, but like, it's the purest of the zombie films. It's just like, no, they go to the island, and they deal with more zombies. And then they come back to New York for like a hot minute, and... we watched zombies walk towards New York. And unfortunately, we never got Zombie 3. Well, we did eventually get Zombie 3, but Zombie 3 has actually, another weird twist for this franchise, nothing to do with this. It doesn't involve Fulci. It doesn't have any of the same production values. It's just, it's just another cash-in.
That is the fascinating thing about horror, is most of the times a sequel will not have the same crew. It won't have the same people attached. It won't even have the same plot.
Oh yeah, I mean the Friday the 13th. I mean both Friday the 13th and Halloween are both examples of franchises that from sequel to sequel are just wildly different and change and morph. And like one of the interesting things I find about the Friday the 13th remake with a buddy of mine, Derek Mears. Hi, Derek. Is that it's the first Friday the 13th movie where Jason is the killer and it's set at a summer camp. And he wears the hockey mask and he kills teenagers with a machete. And you're like, no, that's all the Friday the 13th movies. And you're like, actually, first Friday the 13th, he's not the killer. Second Friday the 13th, he doesn't have the mask. Third one, they're not at a camp. Fourth one, they're not. No. All those pieces kind of came
They're not
together
even in
over
New York
time.
half the time.
Yeah, I mean, they go to Manhattan, even though that movie's all on a boat. The Friday the 13th franchise is wildly uneven.
It's so weird. But it's the same reason like Halloween 2 had nothing to do with the first Halloween, but the marketing got people in seats.
No. Halloween 2 does, because like John Carpenter directs.
Yeah.
Still, and it takes place literally the moment that the night, like the first night ends. Halloween 3.
Oh no, sorry, yeah, I got that once again.
Spirit of the Witch.
There we go.
That's the hard right turn
Halloween
into
3. Sorry.
Into snake lasers and
masks that melt children's heads.
Yes, no,
it's
exactly.
just like the idea of like Halloween 3 drew like that. The first word Halloween is what put butts in seats, and then you just put a 3 at the end. Didn't necessarily have to be the same plot, and like that happens all across horror, where it's just like, here's the title that really draws people in. This is all about marketing, and then we'll just put a number at the end.
Well, that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make it an anthology series.
Yeah.
And then when the fourth one happened, because after 3 was a huge failure,
Yeah.
4 literally like the poster is like just a gigantic face, and they're like, "We're sorry, Michael Myers is back." It's no. That guy.
Sorry.
Yeah. Please don't be mad. Please come back. No, Michael Myers. Because then you also had at this around the same time. What is it? Halloween Kills. I want to say.
Halloween 3 is a good movie.
It is a good movie if you don't call it Halloween 3.
Yeah.
It's like an interesting on its own movie, but like it just doesn't fit into the oeuvre of Halloween.
It's like Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
Whereas it's very much its own thing.
Hang on.
Science.
Talk about what you liked about the movie for a minute.
Oh no. I would say it's one of these cases where Zombie. Sort of what we were saying. It's not that it's there's nothing super complicated about it. So other than saying, oh, they're like the gore is really good. That's not spoiling anything either. That was one of the things that actually really surprised me about this movie was just how cringy and good the gore was. And I would say that the woman who is completely topless in that film, and you think, oh, well, she's there to just be topless. I would say she is there to give you the best throat-biting scene that you have ever seen.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, I felt for her. And that was one of those cases where you're like, okay, yep, that is 100% the reason why I'm investing in this. It is the reason why you should go see this. You shouldn't see it because of the plot. You should see it because it is just an amazing zombie film.
It has got all of the ingredients of.
What are you sciencing?
I am trying to find out. There is an Australian movie that I'm forgetting the name of, but it's got the word Halloween in the title. But famously, it came out around the time of Halloween 2 came out, and it is about a killer ice cream truck, and it just has the word Halloween in the title. And it's an Australian genre film, and I'm forgetting the title, but a whole lot of people went in, bought tickets, sat down because they were like really excited they were going to see another Halloween movie, and they got this really funny well, not really funny, but they got a weird Australian movie about a killer ice cream truck. God, I cannot remember. It's Halloween something. It's got Halloween in the title, but it's just a lot of people I don't think realize how much international film distribution used to be. How much of it was the Wild West back in like. Not even like that long ago, just like in the 60s and 70s and 80s, as like everybody was figuring this stuff out, and the movies that would just be like shameless rip-offs of stuff. Or, I mean, the Italians were famous for this. Like, they made a sequel to the Australian movie Patrick. There's nothing to do with the original Patrick movie. That's about a guy stuck in a guy who's in a coma, stuck in a bed, but people keep dying mysteriously around him, and it's
Well, it's like Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
Yes.
Where it is... Like, I would not... Like, both movies aren't good movies, but they are both fascinating movies. And Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 is one of those things where it takes characters from the last one, and then it just decides to take acid the whole way through. It's one of those cases where, like you were saying, like the 60s through the 80s were the golden era of crazy horror, and then when it got to the 90s, it became more mass-produced, and a lot of the same. You know, you look at a poster, and it's all the teenagers that are going to get killed in a pyramid order of how they're going to die. And then the killer is in the background. Like, that is a lot of 90s horror. But I would argue that Zombie is the pinnacle of the 70s when it comes to monster horror.
The Day Before Halloween, I believe, is the movie that I'm thinking about.
Before Halloween.
Yeah.
You spent a long time on that.
It was one of those things that was like, this thing is in my brain, and I'm going to dig it out if I have to, like a tick. And that's sometimes it's all you can do. All right, let's see here. What else? Let's see here. Some other things that we should mention about this. This movie was infinitely one of the video nasties, and one of the most popular one of that. Do you know anything about the video nasties, David?
I have never heard that term.
Okay, so
please go on.
The video nasties was a list of films that were banned by the British Film Institute in the UK for varying amounts of blood and gore, and then so sometimes there would be trimmed versions of this that would trickle out over time, and that's one of the big things that we have seen in like the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, etc. Is finally getting to see the original uncut versions of these in really nice quality, because for a long time a lot of the video nasties, these were movies that were banned, that you couldn't get places, or you could only get severely censored or trimmed versions of this. Like in the original, when this was originally released as Zombie Death Eaters in the UK, when you see her head get grabbed and it starts pulling it towards the splinter, right before you get contact, it just cuts the boat and cuts to the next scene. So you don't get any of the real gore, like the real stuff.
You don't get the cheese and pepperoni of the pizza.
Yeah, it really it makes some of the editing a little weird to take. It makes it a little choppy, a little hard to. It just, you're not getting the pure unadulterated thing. And the fact that all this stuff then came out all these years later, and now, God, get this. I mean, Zombie has a 4K restoration. Trust me, you're going to see every single drop of blood, every hair, every squirming thing that's out of place in this movie. You're going to see, because the transfer of this movie is gorgeous. So you see every detail, and it's crazy to me. Well, I mean, it's not crazy to me, but like, it is just a thing to remember that not that long ago, even your favorite bits of art. Well, actually, we even see it still happening here. If you watch the pilot of Community, there's about Netflix right now. There's about 3 minutes that's cut out of it, just like little jokes here and there, little asides, little bits, and I don't understand why. Like, none of it's offensive. Like, you could argue about the episode with Chang and whether he's actually in blackface or if he's playing the Dark Elf, even though they call that out. Like, just someone who isn't us can have the discussion about whether or not him wearing black makeup on his face in that particular episode counts as something hateful. But, like, the stuff that's cut out of the Community pilot is like, it's just like random. It's like smoothing off the ends of some jokes. Yeah. It's not like,
Shudder understands that this is not like just like something that's in a film is not representative of how Shudder views certain topics. It is literally, they're just saying like they're handing you this film and being like, this was a film. Mm-hmm. This was a thing that happened.
Retweets are not are not endorsements.
Exactly.
It's just like a thing that they're sharing. But it's here.
Well, and with the while you're looking, like I would say, like with the effects, I found that there was a strange little mix of shitty effects dabbled into it. Like the cadaver at the very beginning when they're in the morgue. That's a really shitty looking cadaver. But also like the little cheat moves of trying to make something seem like give you a little bit like make your skin crawl a little bit more, literally just by putting a handful of worms on this person's face.
It was a movie that was not made for a lot of money. It was a movie.
Yeah.
It was a scrappy little like borderline independent film. That one of the best things about Fulci is that he really knows how to milk every dollar to be as effective as possible, and to take subpar material and still make really interesting images, really unforgettable moments and sequences. There are things in this movie that I'm never gonna forget, and this script in the hands of a lot of filmmakers would have been real fine. It would have been a real footnote of a footnote of like, oh, you need to see, you want to see every Italian horror movie ever made? Well, you gotta get to Zombie sooner or later. And instead, it's incredible. Like even like. So something that somebody said about Fulci was that like people who liked him a lot, and people who didn't. And I would say, if you dig this movie, you're going to dig a lot more of Fulci's stuff. Now, and Fulci is pretty uneven at some points. He's got definitely some stronger films and some less so. He got his start actually shooting like comedies, of which most of them are really hard to find, and the few ones that are easy to find are not particularly lauded over or gushed at or told are great. They are footnotes of footnotes. And yeah, one of the reasons I think you should check out Zombie is because I think it's a chapter in the story of the zombies genre, as opposed to, well, a footnote.
It also has one of the least effective last stands that I've ever seen.
Oh, yes. That's, as I said...
I was laughing at how badly everything went. Because there's a large portion of this film where everyone's like, we gotta get to the hospital. And the hospital is this church. Because, you know, it's on this super out there island is it in Haiti? I don't think they ever really mention necessarily where it was. You can get there from New York, apparently, but
no, I don't think. It's kind of loosey goosey.
Once again, it is the movie's not dense in plot, but a lot of the portion they're trying to get to this hospital, and then they get there, and then these main characters mixed with these other main characters that you've been seeing these stories on different points of the film. And then they're loading up on guns, and everyone's getting ready to make their last stand. And even before the last stand happens, it all just goes horribly wrong in the dumbest ways. Where you're just like you'd think maybe don't do, like, some of these characters do some of the dumbest shit I've ever seen. There's the whole point, like, where they're in the room after someone's been grabbed by a zombie, and this woman's traumatized, but this person comes and saves her, but doesn't do all the steps that he should do to save her. And then he leaves her there completely traumatized. She's like, oh, grab this, by the way. And then she goes and grabs it. And then she's just dead. Because they didn't finish off the other guy.
I mean, so I think before coronavirus, I would have agreed with you. But we have seen, as people have reacted to this tragedy, react in profoundly dumb ways that mostly used to make me pretty mad in movies. There's a lot of decisions that were made in the movie Contagion that when it came out, people were like, that's crazy, who would ever do that? And then we were like, oh, we did exactly all of those things. Fulci, to me, set out to make a more realistic zombie movie, as much as realistic as a zombie movie as you could make with, you remember, it's a zombie movie. With just the fact that, like, all of the zombies are in different amount of decomposition. When you grab them, chunks come off the sides. They are slow and kind of broken.
These are conquistador zombies.
Well, especially those ones that would be very, 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 very old and barely being held together. Where Romero's is definitely much more metaphorical. This one is much more of a, just think for a second, if you had to grab whatever your 10 closest neighbors are. Just whoever's in your building or your house, whatever it is. Yeah. And you said, I'm going to give all those people shotguns and weapons, and we're going to go fight a bunch of zombies. It's going to go poorly. Because unless you live at like a compound and like you guys are all an organized militia or something, and that's a whole separate conversation I don't want to have with anyone. So keep it yourself and don't at me. It is... that group of people is going to be of varying, and it only takes one thing for it to go wrong. And when guns and violence are involved, things can go wrong really, really
Guns
really
and incompetence
quickly.
Rarely are good bedfellows.
Yeah, no, exactly. I saw a YouTube video not that long ago that said something like, most people scream and run around waving their arms when a bee comes around. And those kind of people are not going to stay calm during a gunfight. And it's a really good way of thinking like, oh yeah, of my 10 neighbors who are around me, how many of them run around screaming when there's a bee? And now they have a gun. And how's that going to go? The answer is bad. And that's kind of what I love about the ending of Zombie is like, it's kind of like, in a movie, we'd all band together and become cowboys.
Yeah.
But unless we were actually trained, we're just... gonna shoot.
It is. Yeah. I would almost argue that it is the zombie version of the Belko experiment, where you're just like, oh, this shit's going down. Do you trust all the people you work with? Mm-hmm. Oh, you're just thrown into this situation. It's like the case where like they take the main character of the doctor, like who I would say like one of the main characters.
Yes.
There's a couple primary characters, and he's one of them. And they're about to make their last stand, and he goes to grab his shotgun. Doesn't even make it to the last stand. Mm-hmm. Just offed. Without even firing a shot.
In that way that these things tend to actually happen. Yeah. Like, not everybody gets, in real life, a death scene or a glorious honor, warrior's death or any of that stuff. Like, no. Sometimes it's just dumb and you die. Or, like, you just get off in an accident. Like, it just...
Sometimes you're Drew Barrymore from Scream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
People expect you to make it. Or maybe you're... what was that? They did it on the Green Project. They were held up in the bar and all the monsters were coming... Feast.
Yes.
It's kind of like Feast, where the guy that you expect, like the badass comes in. They're like, who are you? I'm the guy who's going to save your ass. And then he's
immediately
gone.
Off. Well, it's one of the best tricks that you can do in low-budget horror movie is you give your audience a character that you're like, oh, okay.
Play with your expectations.
Well, yeah, exactly. You give them like, oh, okay, this guy's going to be the hero, and then you take them away. It's a lot what they did like in Alien, where like they give you all of these different characters, and Sigourney Weaver, not a star at that time, and by the time you realize like, oh, man, it's going to be Sigourney Weaver versus this xenomorph, you're like, well, that's not, no, there was Dallas, and there's Yaphet Kotto, and this, was it Harry Dean Stanton? Like, no, one of those guys. No, not this poor lady. No, not her.
All these amazing classical actors.
Yeah, and then no, it comes down to her and her cat. The only one left to fight the xenomorph.
As long as the cat survived, I'm good.
Jonesy? Oh, Jonesy.
Oh, Jonesy.
Now, David, we are about getting to the end of our conversation here. We're almost up in an hour, so that means we are in for that time of the show when we decide what we are going to watch next week. And, fun fact, it also involves time travel. Because at some point, we are going to pause this here, and we're going to travel in time just a little bit for David to watch 2 trailers. And then we are going to decide, and then David's going to announce what we're going to watch for next week.
Ken, you lovely piece of man meat, give it to me.
All right, you ready? We're going to be watching either the Australian film, Next of Kin.
Okay.
Or Dead and Buried.
I have no idea what either of those films are.
All right, so we are going to travel in time, and when we are back in just a few moments, David will have seen both those trailers, and he will make a choice. So give us a moment to travel in time. So we are back. We have traveled in time, and David has now seen 2 trailers for Dead and Buried and for Next of Kin, not the Patrick Swayze movie, the Australian horror movie. David, how you feeling?
Wait, so for the 7th time, could you tell me what that film was called?
Dead and Buried?
Dead and Buried? Oh, okay. What the fuck was that?
It's a good sign.
Because here's the thing. Like, I love the look of Next of Kin. I think Next of Kin looks fascinating. Dead and Buried I just, like, part of me is just like, what the fuck is going on?
I mean, we do have an episode 4, so we can always circle back around. But David, much like the Highlander, there can only be one.
I gotta go with Dead and Buried because there was so much happening there that I have to know.
It's a good one, David, and that's why I recommended it to you, and that's why I'm here, and that's why we're doing this podcast, which is sadly, episode 2 now has come to an end. David, do you have any pluggables to plug, or just where do you want people online to bother you?
You know, I would really love it if you'd bother me on Instagram at _DW Marlowe. That's MARLOWE.
Very nice. And you can bother me on Twitter or Instagram at Ken Stachnik. I'm definitely on the Twitter a lot more. That's KenStachnik. David, you have your finger up. What is your last?
I have my finger up because I'm not sure if we're going to be able to put the first of the theme.
Oh yes, no.
On this podcast, and I think it behooves us to talk about who did the theme, and that is the very talented Benjamin Moy.
Indeed.
So yeah, and he also has his own podcast that called Hooked on Score, and I highly recommend that everybody follow up with that and check that out because he's an unbelievably talented individual with, once again, a swath of movie score knowledge to feed to you.
Yeah, and that's actually his podcast is also one of which I've been a guest on. So if you like more of me, you should check out his podcast because occasionally I am on that.
Ken, I love all of you.
I love all of you too, David.
Thanks,
and then, ladies and gentlemen, until next week, watch horror movies, enjoy horror movies, hug your loved ones, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.